Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund says institutions of higher learning have become increasingly unsafe for women. It's calling on men to end the cycle of violence by speaking up against it and unlearning behaviors that enable it. To discuss this further, I'm joined now by the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Fund, Response Fund spokesperson, Tshepo Sefotlhelo. Tshepo, good evening and thank you for your time. So, accepting that institutions of higher learning exist within a society where violence against women, rape and femicide are prevalent, in what way are you seeing that the problem is manifesting itself in those institutions as a microcosm of society?
Thanks for the opportunity and afternoon, Tula Sizwe. From our perspective, really, what we've seen as the fund is, if you look across the country, whether it's the national, the police reporting the national crime stats quarterly, you see that generally there's an increase in gender-based violence across the board. Now, what that says to us is that there's more and more people that are coming out that are reporting, but we also know that there is an underreporting when it comes to gender-based violence. The unfortunate dichotomy that we find ourselves in is that this is also happening in institutions of higher learning, and it's really happening across society that, issues of gender-based violence and femicide are happening in our institutions of higher learning. And we are seeing that abusers of women and rapists are getting younger and younger. Even if you go to schools, whether it be high schools or primary, it's starting to happen in that instant as well. So we really are in an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, and I read some statistics, and I believe they came from your research, because the fund, from my understanding, focuses a lot on research as well to fully understand the crisis that we are grappling with. And the statistics that I read were quite shocking in as far as they revealed the extent to which women in institutions of higher learning have been exposed to gender-based violence, but also the degree to which women end up missing classes as a result thereof. I don't know if you can share some of those numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So what we did in August is we wanted to embark on a campaign called Flip the Switch, which was really about focusing on the men that unfortunately tend to be the ones that are committing these crimes against women and children. So focusing those numbers and those stats, we're moving it away from women and focusing on the perpetrator, right? So we've been doing partnering with universities where they've been assisting us in amplifying that message and having those conversations with students on the ground. And Associate Professor from Nelson Mandela Bay University, Professor Mutinta, came out with the research, and it showed that the unfortunate part is that just under 58% of students have experienced gender-based violence on campus, right? And of that 58%, 36% of them have experienced physical gender-based violence, right? And then 56% of the students are experiencing verbal or emotional violence that's been perpetrated around them. And often these people are known to the survivors or the victims. It's either they are involved in an intimate relationship. In some instances, which is a very low number, it's the lecturers. In some instances, it's friends. But often, these perpetrators are known to the women. So it shows that men really need to start holding themselves accountable. We also need to start holding them accountable, that they need to start behaving and really doing the right things and stopping this type of attack on our young women.
Yeah. Are there any dynamics that we are learning about why it would seem there's a pronounced vulnerability of women in institutions of higher learning? Is it a matter of policies not being in place or policies not being enforced, or perhaps, something that's just as simple as increasing issues of safety, reporting lines, ability for women to speak out, or is it the other problem that you talked about, the men holding themselves accountable and being held accountable by these institutions, or is it a combination of all of these issues and more?
Tula, that's a very great question, and yes, it absolutely is a combination of all the factors that you have raised, right? But also, what also is interesting is that the system is there. Rather, the laws and the policies are there to police this kind of a behavior, right? But when it comes to implementation, that's where we've been found wanting. We know that all 26 universities have GBV, gender-based violence procedures, laws, and where they have in some instances they support students in terms of where you can go into a working center if you need counseling and you've been a victim of this heinous act against women. But also what is happening in our higher learning institution is what is happening in South Africa, because that is the society that we live in, where gender-based violence across the board, the numbers are highly unacceptable. And as we know, from a femicide perspective, South Africa is 5 times higher than the global average when it comes to femicide. You know, it really is a challenge. But also, we know that the issue of toxic masculinity when it comes to boys, you know, when it comes to guys and particularly young men, it's always about the body count. Can you imagine that kind of language where men, when we speak of women, we say, what is your body count, right? So it's that kind of normalized behavior, right, that we need to walk away from. And the reason that I use normalized behavior is that often when there is an incident of gender-based violence, whether it's happening in the home, whether it's happening in the church, or even in a corporate, or even in an institution of higher learning, the first point of call is to keep it quiet so that we don't impugn on the reputation of the church, we don't impugn on the reputation of the company if it's a listed entity often, or we don't even impugn on the reputation of the university. Let's keep it under wraps, let's keep it quiet. And what the indirect consequences of that, unfortunately, that it has normalized abuse, where sometimes people don't even think, you know what, why should I bother reporting, because I'm not going to get the support. Even if me as a Tshepo, I want to report something that I've seen, but is the system geared? Is the culture that we're driving, is it one where people can go and say, this is happening or this has happened? And unfortunately, keeping silent has normalized gender-based violence.
Yeah. All right, Tshepo, thank you. I've got to thank you for your insights, and I really appreciate you unpacking, because usually we say toxic masculinity without unpacking what exactly you are talking about. And I like that you even take it down to what you're calling normalized behavior, where people talk about what's your body count. That's exactly what we need to be doing, to be talking directly about these issues in as far as the behavior of young men and men in general in this society.